Michelle, I don't want to miss anything.
Okay. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Michelle, and I started this banding station in 2002. I said I lived on the Gulf Coast in the 90s doing seasonal field work, working both spring and fall migrations. And over the years, I got really just hooked on migration. I never get tired of the drama of it. It's fascinating to me. And I moved down to Miami, the Miami area in 2000. And one of the things I wanted to do was start a bird banding station. Nobody had one here. Nobody was studying migration here. It's mostly in the Northeast and on the Gulf Coast. So one thing led to another, and come on. Hold on. Why is it not going for me? There we go. Okay, wasn't going. So I ended up picking a site. Migrating birds often concentrate on barrier islands. And
Michelle,
yeah.
Can you get the full screen?
Is it not full screen?
Not for mine, it's not.
Yeah,
it's full screen on mine. What does it look like for you? Mine's showing full screen and with the bar of our pictures on the side.
Yeah.
What does it look like for you?
Mine's fine.
Should I continue?
Yes, please continue.
Okay. So anyways, yeah, migrating birds often collect on barrier islands, and then so the south end of a barrier island, just on a geographic sense, just seemed like the perfect place to put a banding station. And Billbags Cape Florida State Park is kind of known, good migration location. And it's also, if you look, this is Key Biscayne, and it's got some of the largest patches of green in the whole urban metro area. Like all these islands to the north, like South Beach and everything, they're all completely, they're small little parks, but it's almost completely built environment. So selecting the site was kind of a no-brainer, and the park for years has been very accommodating. They've been very easy to work with. Some local friends that lived here a long time kind of helped me select the spots. And Billbags Cape Florida State Park was started in 1967. And the original vegetation there was all Australian pine. That used to have native vegetation, but then I can't remember what else happened in history, but the Australian pine was dominant in the 80s, and it's a pretty tree. It makes a nice sound when the wind blows. It makes shade, but it's a very sterile environment, biologically speaking, because the needles fall to the ground and they inhibit the growth of other plants. So you end up with just a monoculture and no structure except canopy. You don't have understory at all. And this is what it looked like in the late 80s. And then along comes Hurricane Andrew in August 24, 1992. And Key Biscayne was on the very top of the eye wall. It was like 160 plus mile an hour winds. And right there, the north eye wall just brushed Cape Florida. And that provided an opportunity. It completely destroyed this pine forest, this Australian pine, which if you try to take out Australian pine to restore it, the community will complain. I think that happened down in Key West. They wanted to plant native, but they used Billbags Cape Florida State Park used the opportunity of destructive hurricane where the wind and the surge took out everything. And they used the opportunity to be like, hey, let's start over. So they cleared out all the fallen trees, and they basically almost scraped down to the ground. This is a picture from 1993. There's like nothing there. It's completely starting over. And then they restored the topography. It's Florida, so it's not, there's not mountains or anything, but they made a more intricate, they're kind of working on 3 habitats, like a dune habitat, a hardwood hammock habitat, and then a more intricate mangrove habitat. So they did take some big machinery, restored the topography. And there was a lot of fill everywhere. So I think they kind of dug out some natural areas where there was water that would kind of ephemeral lakes and stuff. So they just tried to recreate a more interesting habitat. I mean, the base topography. And then they went to all the native plant nurseries. They had a list of what was historically in the park. And they went to all the nurseries and pretty much got all the native plant seedlings they could. And they planted by hand. They started this in 1994. And they planted all these trees and seedlings by hand. And then fast forward 20 years, more than that now, 25, I'm getting on 30 years. And we have this intricate mosaic of habitats. These are all, and there's all kinds of native trees in here. There's a mangrove area. And so it's just got a lot more richness, you know, compared to that. That was just one type of plant. So it's come a long way. And now that stuff has grown in, it's starting to mature. And this is kind of what it looks like now. And this habitat is a home to hundreds of species of birds. There's a banded redstart leaving us. There's a fall bay-breasted. There's a, this is a Philadelphia vireo, gnatcatcher with the band on it. And I'll talk about this bird later. So, give me trouble. Don't give me trouble. So it took me, I started the station in 2002. This is me and 2 volunteers. Like the first week, we were under a tarp with the table and I had 10 nets. It took me a while. I kind of started planting this in late 2001, and it took me like most of 2002 to get all these permits. I needed federal permits, I needed state permits, and I needed permits from the park. And the first time getting permitted like this takes a long time. So by the time I got my permits together, it was already October 2002. So migration was half over. So the very first year is like a half season, but it happened. And you guys probably are familiar with banding stations. But basically you've got mist nets set up among the vegetation. The birds don't see the nets. They get caught in the nets. We check our nets every 20 minutes. We take the birds out and extracting them. We have a lot of volunteers. They have kind of apprentice programs where they have to volunteer for a certain amount of time because it takes a long time to train people to extract the birds. It's tricky. And then each bird gets put in a bag and we bring them back to the main banding tent and process them. We put the Fish and Wildlife Service band on them with a unique number of bands I get from the bird banding lab. They're free, but I submit the data back to the bird banding lab as a condition of my permit. And then we look at the plumage for species, age, and sex. This bird, this is a greenie painted bunting, and this is a hatch year bird. We call birds in the fall after hatch year or hatch year. After hatch year means it's adult that summer. Hatch year means it fledged that summer. And there's a lot of tricks that you can see. Like you can see these with binoculars on painted buntings at your feeder, but this patch of brown feathers, the primary coverts, is brown on hatch year, both males and female. Adult female, these feathers would be green, just like all the rest. So you can actually age buntings at your feeder. And this is a ground dove, looking for molt limits. Then we record the weight, and then we let the bird go. And the process for processing each bird is like 2 minutes. And our results over the years, this is true for a lot of, we banded 33,167 birds and 114 species in the fall. We've been open every fall since 2002. A couple of years or half years, like that starting year. And in 2017, we missed September because of Irma. But since then, we try to open every day from the middle of August till the first week of November. And then we've been open for 6 springs. And as our new partnership with Tropical Audubon, we're trying to be open on a regular basis in the spring as well as the fall. And of all the species we catch, This is true for most banding stations, and there's a few species that really dominate. For us, it's black-throated blue warblers, ovenbirds, and American redstarts. And of our top birds, most of them are warblers, and they're also warblers that are heading towards the Caribbean. In Miami area, it's very, very biased towards Caribbean wintering birds. In banding, we've had some longevity records, which are, we've had a 12-year-old northern cardinal takes the record. You know, it's a resident, doesn't go anywhere. It's the trip that this child that's banded with us, him and his cardinal, grown up together. We've had an 8-year-old gray catbird, we had 8-year-old ovenbird. I think we've had 2 different redstarts that were 7 years old. Whenever I think of a migratory bird that's old, I just think that's a lot of trips you made without anything bad happening. It's kind of amazing. And so we can review our top 10 species. Black-throated blue warbler over the years has been #1. It's most of the blues. I think that their entire wintering range almost is in the Caribbean. I don't think there's that many in Central America. I think they're pretty rare. Maybe on the Caribbean slope in Costa Rica. So the vast majority of them pass through Florida or go down the Atlantic. It's the most sexually dimorphic warbler. Female and the male don't look anything at all alike, except they each have that kind of hanky in their wing. And it's a beautiful bird. It's our mascot. You know, some years we would catch like 500 of them. We've had days where we've caught like 150 of them in one day in October. They already migrate now, but we had a few around. There's always some early ones, but the bulk of these guys move through. They hit our area in October, like mid-October, 16th, 17th, 18th. Ovenbird is our #2. They do most of their migration in September, and that's our #1 wintering bird. We have a lot of ovenbirds. We'll catch them in August, and we'll recapture them in November, and we'll catch them from other years. So that's a very common wintering bird in Miami-Dade County in the winter. And Cape Florida is a great place for them because of all our vegetation, the understory, and there's less feral cats in that park compared to a lot of the mainland parks. And redstart's #3, which is they're just cool birds. They have a pretty wide breeding range and a wide wintering range, but a lot of them are going to the Caribbean. And also gray catbird. This is another species that a lot are migrating, but then we're the destination for a lot of them too, because they're all over the place in deep South Florida in the winter. So are redstarts too, but catbirds are everywhere in the winter. So some of them are going all the way through that we catch, and others are just at their destination. And black and white warblers, we catch a lot of them, average 116 a year. We've been catching a lot of them lately. They migrate early, they migrate late. There's always black and whites around, except for maybe 2 months in the middle of summer, because we get a lot that spend the winter, and they start migrating in like July, and they're still migrating in May. So we see a lot of them. I spend winter in my garden. Worm-eating warbler, that's another really cool warbler heading for the Caribbean, and we catch a lot of these. That's a classic September migrant. They're just starting getting going now, and then they're almost totally done with their migration by October. So if we get a good weather event in early mid-September, we're going to be up to our eyeballs in worm eating. They're very feisty. They have a great personality. They're always like nipping at you. And of course, common yellowthroat. Not as common as some of the other birds we catch, but there's plenty of them. They're very wiggly. They get caught really good, but they're good birds. We have a lot that breed in the Everglades, and then we've got different races of them that come down here for the winter and migrate through. Let's see, northern water thrush. These guys are mostly going, we have a few of these winter, and a lot of them going all the way through. And Northern Prula, same thing. These guys, they breed not that far away. They breed in Big Cypress, and they winter in Miami-Dade, and then a bunch more migrate through. These guys, some of these guys go pretty far. They're some of our fattest birds. And then the red-eyed vireo, rounding out our top 10, the only one or two non-warblers in our top 10. And these guys are going all the way through. I think you guys saw on the range map earlier. These guys are going all the way through to the Amazon basin. And there's a lot more of them around than we catch. They stay high. They go over our nets. And you just, anytime you're birding, in August and September and early October, you look up at a bunch of birds and you'll just look and you'll notice in the trees and it'll be like, you see one red-eyed, there's usually 2 or 3 more, and they're kind of lurking and looking around. And they have a lot of character. So those are our common birds. Here's some of our rare birds. We are in what they call like a vagrant trap. The island is notorious for weird stuff showing up. And this was our first truly crazy epic bird that we banded in October 2005. I was on a net run, and this freaking sulfur-bellied flycatcher was flying around. And then 2 net runs later, my friend comes back and is like, "Look what I have in the bag." And it was just an amazing bird to see in the hand. It's big. It's bigger than a kingbird. So that was a treat. And that's the only one we banded. They turn up down there from time to time, every couple of years. And thick-billed vireos. We caught our first thick-billed vireo in November 2005. And then we waited a long time. And then we caught 3 more, one in 2017, one in 2018. And then we caught this guy last fall. And honestly, I heard another one Monday calling. So maybe we'll catch one this year. Or it'd actually be cool if it was like this guy returning. They are getting more common in I suspect that they're breeding like in the Florida Keys occasionally, because people, or maybe Mathis, some of the better preserved hardwood hammock areas on mainland Miami-Dade or in the Keys, because sometimes people see very, very young birds, the super juvenile plumage, like you can hardly tell them from white-eyed vireos because they're so fuzzy, and it just kind of makes you go, And one day we caught this morning McGillivray's warbler hybrid, and we get McGillivray's in our parks time, and if we get one, it usually will hang out, and all the birders get to see McGillivray's. And morning is really hard to see, and so we caught this bird while there was a Tropical Audubon Society bird walk visiting the banding station, and there was more than one person who was frustrated that it wasn't a full-blooded morning. So I'm like, well, you can count it on as a half on your life list, I suppose. And the reason we thought it was a hybrid was the young mornings usually have more yellow throat, and also there's a difference in the structure of the tail, the tail length versus the undertail coverts, said McGillivray's, but the eye ring, McGillivray should have more of an eye ring. And when investigating this bird, it turns out there is a hybrid, there's an overlap of their ranges, I think up in like somewhere where the western McGillivray's matches the eastern morning, and there's a hybrid zone. So it's possible. I showed this bird to picture people in the west, and it was like, that was the best. I submitted to banding lab as a hybrid. So my friend like, dang it, I know I still have morning on my life list. I'm like, well, you have part of one. And one day we caught a Key West quail dove. We don't catch that many pigeons and doves. They are mesh sizes for warblers and thrushes and that size birds. Larger birds usually bounce out, but this guy stuck. This is a young male Key West quail dove. He's just molting into his beautiful iridescent plumage. There's some young feathers still are brown with the buff tips, but it's just a gorgeous bird. And then the ruddy quail dove. This is a 5th U.S. record, and it was a total, she was a young female. She was a total surprise. Like, oh my God. You're like looking through the book. No, it's not Key West. We got birds of the Caribbean out in the field. And we had to sit on this bird hung out the whole fall. I think we recaptured her once. We saw her around. We had to sit on the siding because she was hanging out in our banding area. And if we went public, we would be invaded and it would ruin our field season. And then when the field season was done, we made it public. I don't know. She was very, very spooked, very shy. So I don't know if people saw her after the banding. I think one of my friends saw her maybe in the November. But that's our best bird. So migration, I'm not familiar. You guys sound like you're pretty familiar with migration, that they do migrate at night. And then in the morning they fly. And we call it morning flight when they kind of drop down to settle someplace for the day. This is us watching the morning sunrise and listening to birds. Like we'll hear those bobolink calls. I heard a lot of them on Wednesday. We didn't catch anything on the ground. You can hear the bobolinks pouring over. And it's fun to kind of like we get our nets open so they're open at sunrise, and then just kind of watch the morning flight and then wait for that first net run. And the migration routes, this is what the picture on the left is what migration looks like on at least the old Doppler radar in the National Weather Service. This is a huge migration day, millions of birds in the air. The rain are these bands offshore of southeast Florida. Birds moving through the radar beams make a circle that fades out to light blue, with green being just dense. That's a big flight. And people talk about flyways, and they're flying across a broad front, but there really is an Atlantic flyway. Birds from here are going through here to get here. Birds from the central flyway a lot of them are jumping across the Gulf, going to Central America. And there's a division of birds before. I went to Costa Rica the winter before COVID started, and it was full of like Tennessee warblers, chestnut-sideds, golden wings. We're all over, and you couldn't find the black-throated blue to save your life. And so I was like, oh, this is where all those birds are. They're splitting. They are not coming evenly down Florida and then cutting over. I don't even know if you guys, sounds like you guys don't get that many of them, but you'll see more of them in the Panhandle, Mississippi. They're going across, and the ones we're catching are going down. And you can see that we have a lot of recoveries. Recoveries when either I band a bird, we band a bird, and then somebody else either finds it dead, or it's more fun when another banding station catches it and the bird's still alive, or we catch a bird somebody else has banded. The very first bird we ever caught that somebody else banded was from Wekiva, and it was a worm-eating warbler in 2004, and he was banded there, and then like 3 hurricanes crisscrossed the state, and then we got him. He was probably a little dizzy. It took him about a month. And since then, we've got all the bird banding I used to do on the Gulf Coast. I've never been anywhere that has had as many returns and exchanges with other banding stations than us, or than this. And it's because there's a lot of banding stations in the Northeast, and we're downstream of everybody. So it's like we've caught birds from, like, I think we've caught birds from Powder Mill, which is a big station. I don't know if you guys ever heard of some of these stations. Powder Mill, Braddock Bay, the one in West Virginia, Dolly Sods, we caught a bird from them. And then there's a migration station in South Carolina, and they also do a lot of painted bunting banding, and we've had some caught each other's birds. And then these two, so we've had way up here in, I think Newfoundland, all the way down. We had one guy from Cuba that we recaptured, and all the way to Puerto Rico. But we haven't had any dots from the Midwest, so that's kind of, this is the Atlantic Flyway right there in real life. These 2 dots in Puerto Rico is kind of a cool story. We banded a northern water thrush in 2013, and heard from the bird. How we find out birds are recaptured is they report them to the bird banding lab. Bird banding lab sends me a certificate and says so-and-so found your bird, or if I have a bird that's not mine, I report the number and they tell me where it came from. And so I got a certificate saying that
had a print of
I got the certificate saying that these guys in Puerto Rico had caught our water thrush. That was, I think, our first wintering record. So it was kind of cool. It's like what we thought. And so, and also it was 2 years later after we banded it. So that bird is surviving, making multiple trips. And then last fall, I take a Prairie Warbler out of net that's got a kind of an old looking band, and it's not ours. And I call a band, or I get online with the banding lab, and it turns out this Prairie Warbler was banded the same winter that for the same project that they caught our water thrush. They banded this prairie, and 4 years later we recapture the prairie. So it's both an old bird, and it's kind of cool that we actually, these two birds, one of ours was caught, and they banded one on the same winter field season. And the habitat, the location was Jobos Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve, and it's coastal mangrove habitat. So it's not surprising that it has prairies and northern water thrush wanting to be there in the winter. But it's just kind of a cool thing to have happen. We think of the millions of birds that are out there, and you only ban, a few thousand. The fact that other people run into them is pretty amazing. So migration, the birds navigate. One of the things about migration that's interesting is just how do they do this? How do these tiny birds do this? And they found that they use kind of all kinds of ways. They're flying at night, and they use the stars and the sun to migrate. They know where magnetic north is. I know homing pigeons have it very well developed, but I think there's actually a iron deposit or something in their head where they actually can orient to magnetic north. They use topographical landmarks. They think they even can hear subsonic sounds, like a bird migrating 200 miles inland can hear that the ocean, can hear waves on the ocean. They use wind direction. They know they wait for, that's why you get so many with the front, because they know when they have a tailwind, and they probably know to orient themselves the right way versus against the tailwind. Then they kind of correct. This little red start photo is kind of interesting. I've had this photo for a while, but I think he's actually flying through the beam of light that they put up every September 11th as a memorial for the World Trade Center. And the light attracts the migrants, but they have it worked out with the local Audubon societies that they have observers that watch the beams, and when the birds collect in them, they turn them off and they let that group of birds escape, and then they'll turn on the beams again, and then when the birds collect again, then they'll turn them off again, so they keep the memorial display from impacting the birds too much. And I think that's how my friend got this picture of this red start flying in the middle of the night. Back to red-eyed vireas, they're going all the way to South America. They're some of the fattest birds that we catch. They have very long wings. All these birds are doing this. They've got, that's one of the things we're looking for when we're banding them. We blow through the feathers. This over here, this is a live bird. And to make this picture to show the fat, I just put water on the skin, and it both made this, the skin's pretty translucent anyways, but it made it more translucent. And then you part the feathers. And what you're looking at is this white stripe or lightish stripe is the breastbone. Here's your muscles, and then this yellow is the fat. And so it's amazing. These birds can put on almost half again their body weight and still be streamlined and still be able to fly. And they just stick the fat in every little crevice. They've got this is the wishbone. So it's a hollow area that fills with fat. They put fat on their belly, and then they put a bunch of fat on their sides underneath their wings. So they're still, but when we catch these fat red-eyes, you can feel them. They feel heavy. They almost feel squishy. And when you go to let them go, they don't just fly straight up. They kind of drop off your hand, then they get airspeed, and then they get going and go up because they're heavy. And their non-essential organs shrink. Birds, like their reproductive organs shrink down to like nothing this time of year. Everything is just the digestion and the cardiovascular. They have very efficient respiratory and circulatory system, more efficient than mammals. They're with their systems of air sacs. With mammals, the breath comes in and then it goes back out. It comes into a dead end, goes back out. With birds, it's like a continual system where one breath goes here, then it goes here, then it goes here, like in the lungs, air sacs, and then back out. And so like one breath travels in a circle, and then the blood is taking oxygen out at each step. And the endurance of these guys is nuts. They can fly 24, 36 hours nonstop, and they burn up, a bird with that long flight will it'll burn up that fat. And looking at the radar, I think a lot of birds, we all know they cross the Gulf of Mexico, but when I look at the radar in the fall, I think a lot of birds leave North Carolina, the Outer Banks, where the Carolinas stick out, and they go straight through to the islands. And with the right weather, just like one probably 24, 36 hour flight, and then they're home and they're on their wintering grounds. But when they need to stop, it's good to have stopover sites, and especially in a place like Miami, which is so urban. There's kind of three categories of stopover sites. A fire escape is just anything. A boat at sea, you've probably heard or seen maybe people that are on boats, and all of a sudden in bad weather, they get covered with birds. Or there's a really cool video of a lighthouse in Maine from a few years ago, just covered with spring warblers. And that's the weather is bad, I just need to land. The dry tortugas are like that too, because there's not a lot of habitat. So that's can be anything. Convenience stores, like maybe a small patch of woods that can provide cover and a little bit of food, to put on a little bit of weight to keep going. And then a full service hotel would be a big patch of habitat that can hold a lot of birds. And if birds are, most of the birds we catch are very fat, especially after a rain, something that interrupts birds that wouldn't normally stop. But we'll get these hard cases in, and part of what we're finding out, part of our data tells us, is that restored habitat at Cape Florida is both a convenience store for birds that don't need to stay long. It's also a full service hotel. It's got wintering birds, it's got birds that might take a week, 2 weeks to replenish their muscle and replenish their fat so they can continue their trip. And so here's our results from this year. This is our first spring since 2014. We banded 964 birds with 33 species. It was slower than usual. I don't know if you guys noticed, but I was talking to other people like Jim McGinty. He said him too, all over the state. It was like, where were they? We got 64 days in. That was 64 days to catch 964 birds. And our birds by net hours was the slowest by a lot. It was like half of what it normally is. With birds by net hours, you take the amount of birds, you caught, divide it by the amount of net hours you could control we had more nets this year than 8 years ago. We did have one good day. We caught 142 birds of 14 species on April 22nd, probably after a front with rain, something that made them have to stop. But even with low numbers, we had some goodies. What I think happened is that we just had, on a large scale, the winds were so easterly that everything was shifted west, and like not even on Florida. It was so, when I look at the regional radar, the migration, the numbers of birds pouring through like Brownsville and Corpus Christi that were just kind of going around the Gulf was huge. But we did manage to catch, like in spring for about a week, like May 3rd, 4th to like 12th or 15th is like our window for Connecticut's in spring, where we usually can see them pretty reliably. Some years we caught 6, 12, 15 of them. This year we caught 1. But we also did catch, and this was our unexpected bird of spring, we caught this gorgeous mourning warbler. And I pulled him out of the net. I walk up in the net and I'm like, oh, here's our Connecticut finally. And I was like, you're not a Connecticut. What are you doing here? Because they're migratory route in spring or in fall. It's not really anywhere near here. And we caught, it's always fun in spring to catch the birds that change their plumage. Our top species, the red starts, the ovenbirds, the black black and whites and the black-throated blues have the same plumage spring and fall, but it's always a treat to get the spring. Unfortunately, we dipped on scarlet tanager. We did catch a few indigo buntings. We only caught an evidence of like who was missing. I don't know where they went. I think we got them in Louisiana in the past. We only caught 9 blackpoll warblers this spring, and most the other 5 springs we caught anywhere from 50 to 70. So they just weren't around. And we had a lot of winds out of the southeast, and I don't know, since I thought maybe they just jumped over extreme South Florida, but when talking to other people and saying, well, we didn't have them in Tampa, we didn't see them here, I was like, well, they just weren't in Florida at all then. They just were shifted by the winds. And fall, we'll see. We open August 15th, and as of yesterday, we've banded 275 birds of 22 species. Our highlights is a Canada warbler, yellow-throated vireo, 3 Louisiana water thrush. They have a super early migration. We start seeing them all the way in Miami by like after 4th of July weekend. So when we start banding on August 15th, most of them have already migrated through. We had 4 prothonotary so far, and then on our more common stuff, our top birds are 65 ovenbirds, 44 red starts, and 33 black and white warblers, which is, so our August right now in September, it's typical, if we don't get a nice weather pattern and a big bird day, like, our biggest day so far has been 40 birds in one day. I'm hoping, we always want the 50, 80, 100 bird days. Any minute now, because as September wears on, the diversity increases. Like every day we catch a new species for the season. And here's just a little bit of what we all catch. As I said before, our nets are really set up for songbirds, so we don't catch, but every now and again we'll catch a hawk. Here's a broadwing. We catch broadwings and red shoulders, but we mostly catch Cooper's hawks and sharp-shinned hawks, which makes sense because they're in the forest hunting songbirds. We never caught a falcon because we don't have open nets. And sometimes we catch white-crowned pigeons, and it's kind of cool to look at them. We see them all the time on our site, but it's been a while since one's gotten in the net. This is a young male, and he's just growing into beautiful nape feathers. And we catch weird birds. We catch a lot of Chuck-Will's widows. We probably catch 30 in a season, thereabouts. And usually, we open the nets in the dark, so they're open as the sun rises, and that's usually when we get these. And look at the mouth on that thing. I had one morning that had half swallowed a northern water thrush, which is a mouthful. Like I can see one trying maybe a prula or something, but that water thrush was a mouthful and it couldn't swallow it completely. I don't have a good picture of that. I took one, but it was blurry. It was too early. And we used to catch a couple of hummingbirds. You have to have a special license to ban hummingbirds. I don't have that. Well, it's been a long time since we've caught one. I think as our woods have thickened, we just don't get them in there anymore. But we just catch them, look at them, measure them, and then let them go. But yeah, it's been years. We catch birds with attitude. Everybody knows how the great crested flycatcher has huge amounts of attitude. In the hand, they snap their bill. So you kind of want to do flamenco with this. It's like castanets or something when you're holding one. Wide-eyed vireo, the crazy wide eye, and they're like, they're fun. And then blue jays have lots of attitude when they're out and about, but surprisingly, they're really mellow in the hand. It's almost like they know you're bigger than they are. And instead of fighting you all the time, like a wide-eyed vireo would try to do, they go the other way and they make big eyes. They're like, don't hurt me, please don't hurt me, and try to go for your sympathy. And then there's our favorite finger chomper, northern cardinal. They hurt. That big old beak. And we catch stuff that we catch that isn't warblers. We catch a few wood thrush a year, not that many. It's like one of my favorite thrushes. We catch Veery, Swainsons, and gray cheek, with Veery's coming first. We should be getting one any minute. I know you guys are looking for Veery's during your chat. Any minute now, we could get one in our nets. They start showing up now, and the Swainsons come in heavy in late September, early October, and then the gray cheeks come in late October. And the wood thrush will come. We'll get them in October too, but we usually only get one or two a season, so we get pretty happy when we see one in the net. And even though we're banding in the woods, sometimes we catch sparrows. This grasshopper sparrow is gorgeous. And we've also caught seaside sparrow, which was like, whatever, you're lost. You're up in the sky in the middle of the night. You just landed wherever, and then you're on the ground going, why am I in the forest? Sometimes we catch Lincoln sparrows, and we caught one swamp sparrow. We get all excited when we see a sparrow in the net, because it's not. Most sparrows don't even bother to get all the way down to Miami anymore. And we catch tanagers. The summer tanager is a treat because they stay red year round. Where they, you guys probably know the scarlets still keep their jet black wings but get green, so they're always a treat. And the only woodpecker we have on our site is red-bellied. They're kind of a trip. They breed, they're resident. This is a juvenile. It's just getting his red head feathers in, going through a molt, looking pretty scraggly. And everybody's favorite bird. I don't know if painted buntings winter as far north as you guys, but they winter in Miami-Dade County and Broward. And everybody puts out millet feeders. And my little tiny backyard, I had something like 7 hanging out last winter. And so we catch a lot of them some are wintering in the park, and a lot are going on their way to the islands, Cuba. And we catch 1 or 2 grosbeaks a year. Not that many. It's always a real treat when we have one of those, but they chomp even harder than cardinals do. And this is our specialty, warblers. We're a warbler site. Blackburnian, pretty scarce. We've caught maybe 10 in 20 years. Although we had one year where the wind was out. We had a weird wind pattern. We caught like 4 in one day. It's like, okay. That was like 2009. That was a great day. And this is our favorite. We haven't caught a cerulean for about 2 years now. We were hoping, but there was like 2 in Dade County on Monday. It's getting kind of late. Maybe if we're lucky, but if we don't catch them by this weekend, I think the window is passed because they're pretty early. We caught, I think, 9 or 10 also. And the peak date for us seeing them is like August 23rd. So it's starting to be the end. This was an adult male. Actually, that's what you guys had on your pictures, was an adult male. It's just beautiful. And then we catch a few Wilson's warblers. They're just really cute. They'll show up later, and sometimes they'll spend the winter, get on the Christmas bird counts. It's a very, very widespread warbler across like all of Canada and in the West. And there's not that many that end up in Florida, so they're another treat. And Prothonotarias that we talked about, they're moving through right now. Just a great bird. They also breed in Big Cypress, so we can go on a road trip not too far to see them in the summer and hear them. Sweet, 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 sweet. And chestnut-sided, that's another one of these birds. I said earlier, there's tons of them in Costa Rica. We catch a few every year, but we've never caught probably more than 8 in a season, if that. I'd have to look at. So that's all. We're always excited to catch them here. And so wherever they're going, they're not moving through our area because they're wanting to get to Central America. That bird is all over Costa Rica in the winter. What we do have a lot of is Swainson's warblers. We catch 30 to 40 a year, and that's a bird that's a lot of a want bird on a lot of people's life lists. They're hard to see. I've never been able to see them as easily as I do in Cape Florida or anywhere in Miami-Dade in spring and fall. And with that big blackbird beak, and people like overlook them because they're dull, but I think they're fantastic. And Her friend makes videos of them when he sees them, and I never really realized because it's hard to actually get to observe Swainson's warblers. For like the Louisiana, the northern water thrush rocks. Louisiana water thrush is like a circular rock, and the Swainson's warblers just walk around and vibrate. It's the weirdest thing. It's like, okay, you're vibrating and tossing over leaves with your huge bill. Yeah, who else? Hooded warblers. They're just another. They just glow. We had one on Monday on site near the nets, but he didn't get caught. He teased us. But we have a pretty good chance. We usually catch maybe anywhere from 6 to 12 of those a year. And then there's a golden wing. We catch one every couple of years. We caught a Lawrence's one year. It was kind of a back cross. It wasn't a pure 50-50 split. It was kind of, but it was definitely not pure golden wing. Blue wing we get pretty much, that's pretty much annual, like one or two. And I'm getting near the end. We've got yellow-throated warblers that are all over, but you notice you never see yellow-throated warblers in a flock. You never see a giant flock. Hey, look, here comes 23 yellow-throated warblers. There's always like one here in with the other flock, and they really should be the ones called palm warblers, because down here they'll spend the winter and hang out in palms. So you see them all the time, but we only catch one or two in a year. And I think that brings us to the end. If anybody's interested in supporting the Cape Florida, donating, we've got, you can just donate through the Tropical Audubon donate page, and then when you're scrolling through after you've paid and whatever, the very last prompt will be any notes for your donation. You can enter Cape Florida Banding Station, and that would mean that the donation will go for us for our equipment and operations. So that's pretty much it.
All right. Well, thank you. That was fantastic. And I invited the people from the Wakaiwa Banding Station, but I don't think anybody's on. So I'll ask a question. One of their very common birds is the yellow rump warbler, and you haven't mentioned that.
You know, being as south as we are, we close on November 10th, and the reason we go 1 week into November, and the reason we close so early is because in the beginning I tried to stay open late, like till Thanksgiving, and we have this gap in extreme South Florida where we don't have enough of the wintering birds. I wasn't catching anything. I was having like one bird days, and we sometimes catch a few myrtles before we close, and we are the only banding station on Eastern Seabird that gets excited about, we caught a myrtle this year, look at yellow rump, because the stations further north are slammed with them. So yeah, they're around, but they just take so long to get. I mean, we don't really have them settled in until after Thanksgiving as far south, and anything is getting later and later that we get them as the years unroll.
Okay. Susan's going to read the chat questions, and everybody put your questions in the chat.
Hey, I'm Susan from the Wakaiwa station.
Oh, hi.
Hi. Yeah, we haven't been getting that many yellow rumps lately either. So, the last couple of years. So I don't know what's going on.
How late do you band until?
We usually band all year except the midsummer.
Okay.
It was a little different this year. We just were, but yeah, generally we pretty much band all year except the heat of the summer. We pretty much just get cardinals and wrens.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we had a pretty good day. Yes, we don't get the quantity of birds you get. I mean, for us, a big day would be 30, and that would be a big deal.
How many nets do you have?
Excuse me?
How many nets do you guys have?
I think it's like 23.
That's about exactly what we have. We're being on the coast and on the island, it concentrates stuff. So think in this, like in the center of the state, they're all kind of spread out moving. Where they really
Yeah, it sounds. I'd like you. Do you accept visitors if we ever want to come down?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay. Sounds like it gets pretty exciting down there.
It can. Our record day is. We actually tied our record day last year out of nowhere. We had a 225 bird day of
Wow,
about
that's incredible.
5 species maybe.
How many volunteers do you have?
We have a lot because everybody, people work, so they have the scheduled staff. We try to have 4 people on site, a bander and 3 extractors. And
So we only do on Sundays. Do you do it during the week as well?
yeah, we try to be open every single day. From
Oh, okay. So we're always,
August 16th.
we're Sundays only. So
Yeah,
we
the
probably miss, sorry.
29, yeah, you guys probably do miss the biggest days. In 2019, because I had, because of a lack of banders, we were only open 4 days a week, and I'm like, well, that's good coverage, we're sampling, but those 3 days we missed such a good day in October. It just kills me. I woke up. I was gonna call in sick from work, and then I woke up and I really was sick. This was before COVID. This is 2019.
Oh,
And I was like, crap. But I called in sick from work. I go up and I look out my window, and I got like 2 yard birds. I was a tiny little yard, and there's like, oh look, there's a bay-breasted. Oh look, there's a chestnut-sided.
oh gosh.
There's bay-breasted, Philadelphia vireos, chestnut-sided. It's like all over, everywhere you look, were all these birds. I was just like, God, nobody was there to open that day. I was like one of the best
Gosh, I know, it's
movements in years. So I'm just like, and the day after Irma was pretty good too. I remember cleaning up debris and hearing all the birds and going, yeah, we're missing that one too.
I know sometimes some weather comes through, or the weather, we're like, nothing's here,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's a hit and miss sometimes, but it was very interesting talk with, you talked and I learned some things, so it was great.
Oh, cool. Thanks.
All right, we had a few questions. One of them is, how dangerous is it to go on some of these hiking trails by yourself down at your park, state park?
You mean like from people? Well,
Yeah,
that's one
probably.
thing I like about that site, because I'm there early in the morning and sometimes by myself, is it's controlled access park. We have the code to get in. The park has been very supportive, and in 20 years, we're also hidden, because the park has like 1 million visitors, and the last thing I want is people that don't understand what's going on, like seeing a bird in the net and trying to take it out. So we're actually hard to find. You kind of have to know where you're going. And, so that's why we have people visit us, make arrangements in advance. And just being secretive, that park's pretty safe. There are places in Miami-Dade that you're right, I would not want to be hanging around by myself, but Cape Florida, 20 years, I've never had trouble.
Great. Now this is going back, somebody asked a question about the landscaping. Who did the landscaping when they redid the park?
I can't remember who did like the actual, like the heavy machinery stuff, but Elizabeth Golden's the park biologist, and she started in 1994, and she's pretty instrumental in getting that stuff, choosing the plants and finding the plants. And she works with me to this day. Like, she was the bander this morning. And so yeah, Elizabeth Golden had an awful lot to do with that.
Okay. And they asked who runs the place. So I don't know if they mean if that's a state park or not sure
Runs
that.
the place, the banning station or the park's
Quite
the
sure,
state
Carol,
park.
if you're still on, if you want to clarify that. You run the banding station, correct?
Yeah, I ran, and my home right now is a tropical Audubon, and this is a new thing for actually getting paid to do this. I've done it as a volunteer or on the coattails of other jobs for years. And in 2019, I got to if I can't make this a paying gig, I don't have the time to do this anymore situation. And so right now I'm partner with Travel Audubon. I never became my own nonprofit because it's easier to partner with another one rather than have to reinvent the wheel with the infrastructure. And so we partner with Bill Baggs Cape Florida State Park.
Very
So
good.
that's where we are from here on out. and it's allowing us to do more because this is going to be my job. So it means I can focus on it, put it first, not trying to do it on the weekends when I'm working like 40 hours a week in an office and the nights at a restaurant and then trying to find time for this. It wasn't very sustainable.
Mhm. Natasha asks, how can I become apprentice? Is there an application?
The big thing about being an apprentice is it's hard for people out of town because we don't have any housing available, but basically we have people come down or they volunteer they commit to at least 1 day a week for the whole season, because that's how long it takes to train somebody from scratch to being an extractor, and then they'll learn faster or slower depending upon how good their days are. You know, if you have a boring day, you're like, I only got to touch 1 bird today. But if you are there on good days, you'll learn faster. We don't, right now, we don't have any infrastructure in place. I mean, it might change in the future, but we don't really have a whole lot of ways to offer places for like visiting people to stay and work with us. Because housing is very expensive, and you know, it might be a goal in the future, but right now we have but the advantage of it is that we're really rooted in the community. We don't a lot of banding stations have hired seasonals and people that do the circuit like what I used to do, which is cool. There's nothing wrong with that. And my ideal would maybe we have like 1 seasonal intern who's there and gets paid and is there every day, and then the community volunteers. But I like the community volunteers. I'm kind of rambling, I might be going off. But I like how our setup is because we have members of the community. We have a lot of diversity. We have like a 17-year-old through an 80-year-old volunteering with us. We got people of different backgrounds. We got students. We got, you know, Latin people. You know, we got everybody. You know, so it's a good. I like the diversity of.
Very good.
Kind of
She's also asking, have you collaborated with banding stations in the Caribbean?
No, and I think that would be cool to do, like to look south about things we could do. Part of working with Tropical Audubon, having this be my full-time job, is being able maybe to develop things like that. We're just getting going with this partnership with Tropical. But I think if there is a collaboration with anybody in the islands, that's you, Cuba, or wherever, it would be cool.
I think that would be cool. Now, since you started, which species have you seen the largest and most consistent decline?
All of them. That's a good question. Can you 10 minutes while I review all the data? No. Black-throated blues, even though it's our #1 species, we used to have days where we catch 400 and 500, 550, and we haven't caught 550 black-throated blues in years. They're still around, but you know, big black-throated blue year is like 300, and as our canopy's gotten taller, there's the structure changes in our woods. I can be like, okay, yeah, we catch less red-eyed vireos because they're up over our nets. The blues hang out pretty low. So the fact that we just haven't had a huge 450, 500 black-throated blue warbler year since the aughts kind of makes me go,
Yeah. Now, if someone were to visit, how would you arrange it?
Email me and we'll just arrange it.
Okay.
Prefer people are vaccinated. We're all vaccinated.
Mm-hmm. And then Pat said, great job. She grew up in Miami and spent a lot of time there. And she remembers the Australian pines that were everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Did she bird when she was growing up?
I don't know. Pat, did you bird when you were growing up? Let's see.
Yes.
Yes, there she is.
I've been birding 55 years.
There you go.
I started with the Audubon Society down there in Matheson Hammock.
Okay. Because I moved, my first time I came to South Florida and was 94. So it was after Andrew. So I never saw it before. And my friends that remember it say it's easy to see the birds in the Australian pines, but they don't hang around so much.
Right. Well,
And then
the Australian pines were there in the 60s and 70s as well. I mean,
Right.
because I was birding there is, you know, and I know there's been a decline because even when I go to Miami now, my sister still lives down there. And I don't see anything. We used to see spotted orioles all over her street all the time. And there was another bird, I can't remember the name of it right now, but it was red and black. Yeah, yes, exactly. Yes, and we saw that all the time too. Now you don't see it. You don't see any of them.
Yeah, those are declining. I mean, those are the exotics in town, but those are declining.
What was
Yeah.
that? Was that the bishop you said?
No,
The
bulbul.
bulbul, red whiskered
Oh,
bulbul,
red.
Oh, the
red
bulbul.
something bulbul, and I'm trying to red vented. I can't remember the name. It's red something or other bulbul.
Yeah, it's a bulbul.
It's a bulbul.
And they have a strange song too. They call out to you, you know, if they see somebody, they start calling.
Mm-hmm.
Very strange.
Yeah.
Yeah, those were the days, my friend.
Yeah, that's the thing about now that I remember when I first started in the 90s doing seasonal field work, I talked to people at these banding stations or old timers. They'd be like, you have all the species, but you don't have the numbers that you had before. And the old timers were talking about, you should have seen this in the 60s. And now what's bugging me is that like the stuff I saw in the 90s in Louisiana and you know, in spring and in southwest Louisiana and southeast Texas, you know, like a flock of like 8 cerulean warblers and stuff.
Yeah,
I'm like,
exactly.
oh my God, I'm the old timer now. I'm the one with the memories from 30 years ago and how many birds they were. And that's sad. It makes me sad.
I miss it too because of all I mean, you could see anything you wanted to see, really. I mean, there were flocks of swallows everywhere. There were flocks of just everything flying around. It was incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, it was obvious something was going on. It was the migration. Now you got to look really hard to see that it is migration.
I mean, we have some days where they're still all over. I mean, there's been a lot of swallows in the air lately.
Well, we have them up here too. We have tree
Yeah.
swallows,
Mm-hmm.
but the
We
refuge.
have a lot of barns moving through right now.
Yeah.
A lot of
mhm.
barns. Cool.
All right, I did have another question. Juanita wanted to know, is there a list of plants that have been planted at Billbags?
There is.
And where would you access that?
I have a list on my hard drive. I don't know if there's an official list that's public. You just have to ask. I'm trying to think off the top of my head and a memory test. A lot of them are like stoppers. A lot of the stuff that you'd find in the Keys hammock. A really big bird tree we have down here, it's probably our #1 tree, is Ficus aurea or whatever, the strangler fig. They fruit at any time of year, and that is the #1 choice for birds. We also have pigeon plum, wild coffee. What else? We have oaks, but not as many as you guys do up there. What else? Trying to think, what do I have in my backyard? A few mahogany trees in extreme south. Wait, actually, there's no mahoganies at Cape Florida. They have the palms, the sabal palms. What else is out there? Pigeon plum, sea grape. Some weird, obscure, deep South Florida trees.
Gumbo limbo.
Oh, yeah, we got, gumbo. I know, I'm missing some obvious. Lots of gumbo limbo.
Love the name.
And I've got as many of these trees as possible jammed in my tiny little subdivision backyard.
That's good.
So,
All right, yeah, and when I did say her parks are removing the pines, Australian pines, although there are still quite a few. Very good and
Park
great
is kind
job.
of- what park's doing that?
Juanita, what is our county? I'm
Indian River County.
Indian River, thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, they're going after them on the lagoon as well as in other parks too.
Because I know in Key West, that fort, I'm spacing on the name of it. Jefferson down on the Tortugas, the fort that's on the mainland in Key West.
Yeah.
They tried to get rid of their Australian pines and replace them, and the locals caused a ruckus because that you cut down something, it's going to take a while before the new thing grows, and so people are like, "Where are trees going?"
Right.
Yeah.
Well, do
That's why,
half.
like when Andrew, everybody was busy like trying to get their house together, and by the time they got their house together, like, oh, okay, you got new trees down at Cape Florida. I snuck that one in there while everybody's discombobulated, but it worked.
All right. Let's see. Thanks. Everybody said thanks so much for this talk on the banding station and all the beautiful birds. Very informative.
So we can write her. You have an address or email in the chat?
Let me put it in the chat.
Thank you.
Where are you, chat? All right, I'm gonna stop share. Because then I can go to chat. Okay. I'll give you.
Yeah, I think you should write up your experiences long ago. And if you have an article, that is always great to see the differences in numbers. People need to know that. But you're saying that the difference in growth of plants may have something to do with it too.
It can be hard to tease out with the banding station. If you got the weather variation telling, determining how many birds are on site. You've got the structure of the plants changing, how
Yeah.
what your likelihood is of catching something. So there's a lot of variables too. Let me see. I'm gonna put 2 emails. Let me put my work email too. This might be easier. I'll look it up. Make sure I'm spelling it right. Oh, there you go. Cool. All right. Hold on.
And so you think that the plants variations do bring more birds than they eat off of them?
Then the pines.
Yeah, you have more, there's more food available. The pines don't have any fruit. You have more, you have both more physical habitat because you have low plants, understory, you have the mid-story, you got canopy. So you have more actual places for birds to be.
Right.
And also all the different fruits. And the different plants and different, they call it niches, ecological niches, provide a wider range of insects, fruit. So there's just more. Now I don't have any before data because I don't have a time machine to go back to before Andrew. And also when you're talking about safety, Virginia Key is nearby with Australian pines. So it could have been, well, here's a treatment station and a control station, but first of all, I didn't have the staff to do 2 stations. And second of all, on Virginia Key, I wouldn't have felt safe by myself because just anybody can show up there. So
Well, you're doing important work.
on a lot of levels.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, she's got her email in there. And
Right.
Y'all see that? Let's see. I'm reading.
Thank you so much.
this was wonderful, Michelle. Thanks again.
very
And we'll put the recording up very shortly.
Thanks. I'm reading the comments before I clock off. Oh, there you go. Yeah, so just give me an email. That's the best way. And we'll go from there if you want to visit.
All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you for joining us, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great evening. And thanks
Okay.
again, Michelle.
No problem.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Good night.